Bum 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 dum bum 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 bum. But I am I.
Thank you for Friday. Thank you.
All right. So we will start essentially what we finished yesterday. The end of the third line from the top on page test. We are explaining the principle of chitzenius akav and pnimius akav. The kav, as we said, has an element of mitzius oir, even to the extent that it can be referred to as yesh me'ayin. And we discussed yesterday the principle of yesh. And the reason for that is because the kav, as the Rebbe says, is nimshach al dei hatzimtzum. What does this mean? Lihine, lifnei hatzimtzum, for before the tzimtzum, hakoil kolu bi'atzmusi yisbarach. Everything, this is what we discussed yesterday, the principle of everything, is part and parcel of Atzmus. Atzmus has everything. Be'inyan hatzimtzum. Therefore, what is the function of the tzimtzum? The inyan of the tzimtzum is liyois, that it should be b'bchinas itziyo, that it should have an element b'bchinas itziyo, an element of itziyo, of coming forth chutz le'atzmusei kaviyach, outside of the atzmus kaviyach. The principle of outside of atzmus is kaviyach, because there is no such thing as yotzem chutz le'atzmus. But it has bechinas itziyo chutz le'atzmusei. The bechinas itziyo chutz le'atzmusei means that whereas beforehand, when it is kol be'atzmusei, everything identifies itself by its relationship to atzmus. Part and parcel of atzmus. In atzmus you find everything. The bechinas itziyo chutz le'atzmusei, then it's possible to identify the element on its own, not because of what this is an atzmus element, but the inyan itself can be identified. It's not chutz le'atzmus, but it has the element of itziya. How do you identify this without referring to atzmus? Referring to this inyan itself. That's it. That's the tzimtzum, that it can identify things b'bchinas itziya chutz le'atzmus kaviyach. And then, as a result, through this, nase b'bchinas mitzius oir. Therefore, it became b'bchinas. It acquired the b'china of mitzius oir, or a presence of oir. Again, what's meant mitzius oir? That you can identify oir on its own. Not oir, which is part and parcel of the etzem, but the union of oir and mitzius oir. What is oir? Again, I want to clarify this bechinas mitzius oir, because oir, in essence, is the presence of an etzem. An etzem, because it is an etzem. Etzem means that it is the truth of this, and it is truth itself. Truth knows no bounds. Truth does not exist in one set of parameters or another. We're not in one condition or another. Truth is universal. And therefore, wherever there is any mitzius, the truth is there. This is pshat oyer. The etzem is the etzem. If there is anything that identifies itself, that can be identified other than the etzem, then the etzem is there in the form of its oyer. Because you cannot exclude. Truth has no, I said, knows no bounds. This is pshat etzem. When there is so then in that state, the oyer itself is also etzem. So it is not a mitzius oyer. It is there because the etzem is there, not because it's a mitzius oyer. There's a presence of oyer and a kind of functionality of the oyer. Wherever the etzem is, there is the oyer is there. Because wherever the etzem is, everything is automatically incorporated in the etzem. But then when there is a tzimtzum, the tzimtzum affects that, and there should be which means you begin that it provides the ability to identify elements not as part of the etzem, and therefore it becomes a mitzius. What is the mitzius? What is the functionality of it? Therefore, the oyer is present, even though the oyer still represents what etzem is, but it represents the etzem in a functional manner rather than in an essential manner. Because that's the truth, and therefore it is automatically there. There's a functional element. This is called oyer. For further clarity, this is again the oyer hashemesh. There is the of oyer hashemesh that is not oyer at all. It is the presence of the shemesh itself. Like we say, day is not light that illuminates to be for vision purposes. It is a state of being that is representative of the presence of the sun itself. And then there is another element of this is called oyer hashemesh, which is oyer mitzius oyer, where the oyer has a functional element, not the mitzius of transforming or being sun itself, but being the functional element of light that you're able to see objects, that even in the dark you're able to see objects. This is already a mitzius oyer. This is not the essential union of the shemesh. This is the effect of the tzimtzum. Okay, so let's continue. Like the inyan of Atzilus bichlal. Overall, what is the principle of Atzilus? What does the word Atzilus mean? Atzilus, 5 lines from the top.
Okay.
We just finished the 5th line on top. We're going to the 6th. What does the word Atzilus mean? Atzilus means emanation or separation, setting aside, identifying, yotzel, to bring forth. This is the principle of Atzilus. Atzilus is a kind of in-between state. There is the etzem, and then there is the creation. Creation is a total separate entity. Then there is the inyan of Atzilus. Atzilus means where the etzem emanates of its quality in an emanative level. And what is this Atzilus bichlal? The inyan from Atzilus emanation. Shehu bechinas itzius v'hisgalus min ha'helem. The Atzilus is that it comes forth in his galos and it reveals itself min ha'helem, from a state of helem, from a state of concealment. Now this helem is not concealment that you're concealing something that it shouldn't be obvious. This helem is an essential helem because it's part and parcel of the etzem. And the etzem, there is no identifying anything as a distinct presence. Therefore, everything is in a state of helem because it's part and parcel of the etzem. So when you say atzilus, this is yitzia v'izgalus min ha'helem, where something comes forth and becomes identifiable. And where is it coming from? It comes from the helem, which means it comes from the essential state, from the etzem itself. Whereas as a result of that, and through this process, it becomes bibchinas mitzius in the quality of mitzius. In other words, even though it is still oir and still fully representative of the helem, of the etzem, but it acquires a mitzius, a presence, an identifiable presence. This is the inyan from Atzilus Bichlal. This is a kind of reminiscent of the inyan that we always speak about, that Atzilus is one of the four worlds, but really Atzilus is not a world in the same sense that the other three worlds are. Bri Yitzir Asiyah. And this would be meaningless because we don't know what Bri Yitzir Asiyah is. But if we bring it down and speak of it in the human level, so in the human being there are the koiches hanefesh, chochma, chabad, chagas, and nehi. Then there is machshava, dibur, u'mais. The koiches hanefesh, chabad, chagas, and nehi, are really representative of nefesh. The reason we have chochmah, the reason we understand, is not because of the logic that is through which it is presented. The understanding this is a nefesh element. And as we point out, I'm going to go back to something which we discuss all the time, but if we don't focus in, it will be meaningless. The logic is 1 and 1 is 2 ones. That doesn't entail the nefesh, doesn't entail any element of truth. It's just stating fact. It's 2 ones. 2. The concept of 2. That there is a relationship between these 2. Because in essence there is a unity. That is already a nefesh element. That's chochmah. That's seichel. This seichel is fully representative of nefesh. It is not a logical creation. It cannot be proven and it cannot be explained. Either you have seichel or you don't have seichel. Like the saying is, you can't put a head on somebody's shoulder. You don't have to, because the Rebbe should put a head on his shoulder. But if he refuses to open his head, then the head is not functional. But the point is that this is something that's part of the nefesh. Then there is machshava dibur u'maisa. Machshava dibur u'maisa, this is an external presentation that is encouraged and inspired by the koiches hanefesh, but it is inspired and encouraged and so forth. But the Peil Mamash, what it is a separate entity. It represents it in a tangible manner that it can be taken now and become totally separate from the nefesh. That's it. Machshava d'Oraisa. This is Bri Yitzir Asiyah. This is world. where things exist by virtue of their interaction and so forth. Atzilus, this is like the koyach nefesh at the koyach level. The koyach nefesh themselves also, we understand the way this is in the nefesh itself, and the way they are on a functional level, where the nefesh is mislabish in the guf, and we actually sense the chochem, we sense the bina, we sense the chesed and so forth, but we sense it as a koyach rather than a machshove in a mitzias. So this is the nefesh itself. This is like atzilus, but it isn't really a separate mitzias, but it is galus michutz lenefesh. But the nefesh can express itself in a form of chesed, in a form of gvura, in a form of chochmah and bina. Go back a little bit higher. The reason that in chochmah we can recognize that yes, there is a unity among things. There is two, but there are two ones, but these two ones are one. It's one entity of two. The reason we are able to relate to this is because the nefesh really sees things from a unity perspective altogether. Doesn't see things. There's only unity there. This is way before. This is what the Rambam says. What is the foundation of both foundations? It is that there is Motzu, Rishon, Mamtzi, there is one thing. This unity, this is the only thing that the Nefesh knows. And that incorporates everything and unifies everything. It doesn't unify. There is no separate things to be unified. Everything comes from one Nekuda. Because of that, therefore, when it comes into Chochmah, Seichel can also relate to the union of unity amongst many. And this is why Atzilus is called, as the Lashon over here, Yitziv Yizgalus Min HaHelem. Now, this truth pre-exists in the truth of the Nefesh, the truth of higher than Atzilus. And then in Atzilus it comes forth and be Gala. It makes a pronunciation of that. It announces this truth. The same truth that pre-existed before. Now it makes an announcement of it. And thus it comes to a point where it becomes bivchinas mitzius. He has a presence. These kochas nefesh, going back to our mosel, the kochas nefesh, the chochmah is a clear experience, a nefesh experience, but it is a nefesh experience as an experience. So therefore there's a mitzias of chochmah, there's a mitzias of bina. This is why in the kochas nefesh, even though in the nefesh there is no distinction between chochmah and bina, they're all coming from the nefesh. But in the kochas there is a distinct entity of Chochmah and Bina. Not only distinct entity, they come in order. One cannot function fully while the other is in full function. Das mit Yitziv Galus says, Mitzias, two Mitzias cannot function at the same time. So this is the Atzilus. That's as it is in Atzilus. That the whole union of Atzilus is Galus and Lamin HaHelem, K'moi Kein Hum. The similar union, it is Biklalus Giloi HaKav. In the overall principle of Giloi HaKav. What is the Kav? What kind of entity is the Kav? Shehu bivchinas, that the kav is bivchinas itzius with his galus. What is the effect of the kav? That it has the element of itzius with his galus coming forth and come to revelation, be identified. Shenas bivchinas mitzius oir. But the kav, the kav means that there comes into being a metzius of oir, a presence of oir. What is a presence of oir? This is coming back to our analogy of the sunlight. The sunlight, for example, as a result of sunlight, you see objects, not only see objects, they are external form, but you see actually colors. You can identify red and blue and green and so forth. This is all mitzias. In essence, these are all qualities that are part and parcel of the truth of the oil itself. But now when it becomes mitzius oil, these qualities are identifiable. V'nizhavo hasphirois, and thus the spherois come into being. Li is b'bchinas mitzius. So the spheres come to be b'bchinas mitzius, in the mitzius element. And again, why is it b'bchinas mitzius? That is identifiable individually, independently. Even though it is clear that this is all emanating from the source and so forth, but there is an identifiable entity that is emanating. This is the principle of the kav, which is affected, which comes into being as a result of the tzimtzum. And just to elaborate on that slightly, what is the significant, what is the quality of the tzimtzum, what element in the tzimtzum is that brings this forth? The effect of the tzimtzum is that it makes one very simple change in the oil, in the gilui of the oil. Whereas prior to the tzimtzum, the oil is there because the etzem is there. As we said before, it goes part and parcel together with the etzem. Etzem has a tzimtzum eliminates that gilui. There is no oil. And then the oil is drawn back. When it's drawn back through the tzimtzum, since it comes as a result of the tzimtzum, one element has to surface. And that is that this is something which comes from someplace. This is not an entity that is omnipresent. This inyan that it's coming from someplace, that gives us a metzius. Omnipresence does not have a metzius. Because it comes, that gives it already b'bchinas metzius. Even though it's, as we said many times, it still had the same brightness and purity of the same oil before, but now there is this element that was added to it. It wasn't, and now it is. That gives it a presence. This is the cup. And as a result of that, there's a metzius oil. And as a result of that, you can reveal from the oil also there's a metzius. A metzius, you can identify all kinds of metzius. Pardon me. בכל זה הוא מבחינת חיצוניוס הקהל. However, we have to understand that this all takes place, and this describes the beginning of חיצוניוס הקו. the external view of the Kav. Avol bechinas pnimiyus hakav, but the aspect of the pnimiyus hakav, pnimiyus, internal aspect of the Kav, einoi bechinas itzio v'yizgalus chus liatzmusi. It does not have the quality of coming forth from Mizgala chus liatzmusi, external to the Etz. All right. Despite the fact, Okiyin, rather, only, Gam le'achar ha'tzimtzum, even after the tzimtzum, harei hu kolul be'atzmusi yizborich, the pnimiyus hakav is kolul le'atzmus, is part and parcel incorporated in the etzem itself, atzmusi yizborich, k'moi koydem ha'tzimtzum, just as before the tzimtzum. How do we put this in perspective? How do we understand this? There's a tzimtzum. And we explained that tzimtzum means that there wasn't. Now there is. Which is Enyam Hamshocha. And if Hamshocha, there's a mitzvah. Then we say, Pnimiyus hakav, that remains unchanged from what it was before the tzimtzum. What is this Pnimiyus? What kind of concept is this Pnimiyus? That we say it remains unchanged after the tzimtzum. So this is what we discussed, last few days. In everything there is its mitzius, and what it represents. Why is it there? There's a mitzius. Why is it there? In other words, who initiated it? Its presence. How come there is anything? When we look at it from that perspective, we know, just as in our moshel of Chokhmah, say in Chokhmah we perceive certain things, unity. But we know also that with Pnimius, this unity is nefesh itself. Why is there unity? Because there's nefesh. We can perceive it outside of the nefesh, but in essence, it is a representative of nefesh. If not for nefesh, we would not have this concept of unity. No matter how much logic you will apply to it, it remains a mitzvah. This is the principle of Pnimius and Chitzonius. Pnimius is the pshat. What is the motivating factor? What does it stand for? Where is its life force? Life force is in the Yetzim. And because the life force is in the Yetzim, so therefore it is still Yetzim. It remains where it is before the tzimtzum, after the tzimtzum. It makes no difference. The chitzonius, there is a mitzias. This is, to take this on a lower level, again in an analytical level, in an emotional level. The difference between a human being and the animal. The human being has to eat, the animal has to eat. There's a fundamental difference between these two activities. Phenomenal difference. The eating factor in an animal is exclusively a stomach factor. In the human being, it's an intellectual factor. There's the story, the story of the story with Rebbe Maharash. Time is short. I'm just going to quickly. Everybody knows the story. Just very quickly. The Rebbe Maharash, the Rashab, and his brother the Razor were debating between themselves what's the difference between a Yid and a Habul Goy. And the Maharash overheard this conversation, so he called them in. And he said, I'm going to demonstrate to you the difference. So he called in, there was a goy, a vanke, who was the wagon driver. He was taking care of the chotzer in the courtyard. He called him in and he said, Ivan, did you eat? Yes. Did you eat well? Yeah. Ivan, why did you eat? Oh, I ate so that I can have I drink brown food. So he said, I can have a shot of whiskey. So he dismissed him, and then he called in the shamish, Poshet Eid. Well, I don't remember what his function was. He was also in the Chotzer Poshet. He was a simple yid. So he called him in and he says, I don't remember what his name was. Did you eat today? He said, yes. Did you eat well? He says, what's well? What Hashem? I'm not hungry. Why did you eat? So I can say I keep eating Tehillim. I can learn the Mishnayos. So he dismissed him. Then he pointed out very quickly to him. This seems like a simplistic story. It is a very profound story. For a human being, for a Yidden, that's the full display of the glory of a human being. There has to be a significant intellectual significance of what you do. You have to eat. I'm hungry. No, that's not motivation enough to eat. It has to have a human value. That's what the human being is. This human value, that remains the same when you eat, when you learn, when you are contemplating Avodas Hashem. It's part of the nefesh. It's not an external thing. The pnimis remains the same throughout. You have to interrupt. I'm sorry. Okay, have a good day. I overstayed my welcome over here. Have a good day. We'll reconvene in Mishram tomorrow. Okay, just on time. Just on time. Battery too low. Just
1, 2, 3. Brother, keep your head up. I know you're fed up, but the Jews got the move. Let the heart don't let up. Things get in the way to discern. Ooh, thank you, Tati, for letting me learn, letting me earn, and taking my turn. I know you know one day